You've reached the Signal Watch, movies, television, comics, and more. I'm your host, Ryan Steens. Join me and our cadre of co-contributors as we examine cultural artifacts of the 20th century, boldly explore the 21st, and try to put it all in perspective. Stay tuned. We're gonna try to make this work.
Describe in single words only the good things that come into your mind. About your mother?
My mother?
Yeah.
Let me tell you about my mother.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to the Signal Watch. As always, I'm your host, Ryan Steens, and with me today is...
Simon Day. Lovely to be here again. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And we are watching Blade Runner. And I get to say the name of the movie because this was my selection for one of our Canon. Yeah. I actually picked one for one of the Canon films. This is the Canon films are movies in our personal canon that we felt had some sort of deep impact on us as a viewer, as a movie watcher, maybe as a person. And
the films were made by the Canon Film Company.
Yes.
Thank goodness. That'd be quite bad, actually.
So really, we're doing Invasion USA. But I first saw this in about 7th grade. We rented it. That would have made me, I don't know, 12 or so, 13. My brother and I rented this and started watching it. I think my parents went out for the evening, so we'd gone and picked up some movies. And it was, I think we ended up watching it twice before we ended up handing it back in.
Did you choose it because Harrison Ford was in it and you thought it was going to be like Star Wars?
So no, we partially because Harrison Ford was in it. So when the movie came out, my brother had bought the kids novelization through Scholastic Book Order, which was a thing you could do where you could buy a book, buy books through school. They basically gave you a little catalog and then you sent in a check and the books then showed up at your school desk at some point.
Yeah.
And he read it cover to cover, and we didn't see it in the theater. We never even had an opportunity. I don't remember it actually. I remember the ads being on TV and my dad saying no, that's too adult. You're not going to go see it. And then my brother read the book and he was like, yeah, no, that's too adult. So, I mean, cause I was 7 when it came out. And I think that was a good call. And then by the time we saw the movie, I was 12 or 13. I'd already started watching rated R movies and all that.
Yeah.
I think I knew who Ridley Scott was by that point. I may have already seen Aliens, but I don't know how else what my other context was. But at the same time, I'd already gone to go see The Mosquito Coast because Harrison Ford was in it. And
that's pretty adult.
Right. And so I'd kind of learned, he's an actor. He's not actually Indiana Jones Han Solo, right? So And my brother kind of said, I think this is going to be, a little slow and a little dark, and let's just be kind of ready for that. And so, I mean, at this point, he would have been like a freshman in high school. So we did watch it, and I mean, just from right at the beginning, the first shot over LA, we just looked at each other and we're like, "What is this? How come no one's ever talked to us about this? This thing's absolutely." I mean, like switching from the shot of the cityscape to the flame kind of curling around, Roy Batty's iris. I mean, I remember seeing those shots for the first time and just like having the chills and just being like, I've never seen anything like this, from that point. And then it just became one of those movies we watched probably like once a month or something like that for years. I can't tell you how many times I saw the original theatrical cut on VHS. It wasn't until college that I saw it on the big screen, and I've seen it on the big screen, I think 2 or 3 times at this point. But, we'll talk about kind of everything that, how important it was to me and all of that. But where did you first encounter the movie?
Well, I'm guessing I would have seen on TV, probably with my dad, because he would stay up late, especially the weekends. Well, only the weekends. And Friday and Saturday nights, I saw Alien, I saw Halloween that way. And it was quite amusing because quite half the time my dad didn't know what it was going to be. He just heard good things. So he was kind of like reacting along with me. So we were both just kind of looking at each other and going, ooh. But I think we saw it on TV. And again, yeah, like you said, I mean, I think it's hard to express to any generations below us in age, because now, an advert on TV or a TV show can have amazing special effects, with CGI, and, everybody can do anything now. So I feel like, nobody's really impressed by anything anymore. Whereas, this is back in the days of, where a film like this or Jurassic Park or Terminator 2 was like, holy shit, I haven't seen anything like that before. And then, I guess as soon as I was able at the end of the 80s, when I was probably 15, 16, when my parents finally got a video recorder, it was one of the first videos I bought. And I bought the international cut, which I was reading about it, and that was pretty similar to your US cut, except I think we got more violence in ours. And I was the same as you. This was one of 15 or 20 videos I owned. Those simple days, right, compared to now. And like all the others, which we've kind of covered before, like The Fly or The Thing or Alien or Aliens, I kind of watch these in rotation. So I'd probably go through Blade Runner once every 2 or 3 weeks, probably for 3 years. And I really did know it by heart. I knew all the little looks and movements and, all the kind of like mistakes in it. And so I went to college, didn't really watch it at college. Maybe I kind of made a girlfriend watch it. But the big thing that happened at college was I actually wrote a paper on it. And it was all about whether Deckard was a replicant. And then I think luckily about a year after that paper, Future Noir, the book, came out. So because afterwards, I'd have probably been accused of plagiarism, but luckily I did my paper just before that book came out. And then the same as you, I obviously don't watch it half as much as I used to. I mean, before tonight, because I just finished watching it just before this, actually, I'd probably seen it 3 or 4 years ago on the big screen with a friend down the Alamo. And again, it was great. Still really enjoyed it. We can talk about the different versions and the pros and cons, but when we saw it 3 or 4 years ago, I think the only thing that really jumped out and aged it was when he kind of force kisses Rachel. The old school kind of, if I kiss a girl hard enough, she'll probably start liking it. I remember just turning to my friend and going, "Oh, we can't do that anymore."
That's right.
But apart from that, it kind of really stood up still,
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things that I had some people who I'm friends with who are about 10, 12 years younger than me. And I'm 46 now. And so they're in their like mid 30s. And we were talking about Blade Runner because Blade Runner 2049 was about to come out and they'd never seen Blade Runner. And well, I mean, I kind of get it. And they were like, oh man, I just can't make it through. I just keep falling asleep. And
it's slow.
Yeah. I mean, the pacing of it is not that of an action movie. It is that of a very slow cadence detective movie.
Yeah.
And as you said, like, the effects now to them, like you can say none of that was done in a computer, but they don't really have the understanding of what it meant. And
yeah,
in one, like, it's not like this was the only movie that I'd ever seen that had taken place in the future, right? I mean,
oh no,
this lots of movies took place in the future and in different time periods and different kind of levels. Like talking about Star Trek, like are you talking about star bases and now they're flying through the galaxy, or are you talking about something like Runaway with like Tom Selleck, like? But that was kind of what you were used to. It was like, oh, they're going to go find some, brutalism, for architecture, and they're going to film around that. And, they're going to have a couple things that are a little different from what we have currently. But aside from that, you're very clearly just using some of the niftier looking, modern buildings around with this kind of assumption of they'll tear things down and build new things, and kind of suggesting that all of this. And so a lot of things got filmed, and particularly in Texas back then, because Texas had been growing so fast in the 70s and 80s. A lot of the scenes were filmed for Logan's Run in Fort Worth, Texas. If you've never seen Logan's Run,
the fountain.
Yeah, it's so weird to see because the fountain's just a very nice little fountain, but it's so important to that movie. And so. But seeing a future that was like, oh my God, actually, this is how it would be. And you were so immersed in every shot of.
Well, it's also like Ridley Scott. I think, whatever sins Ridley Scott has committed since. And I still give him the benefit of the doubt. I feel like he's one of the old gods like Spielberg or Cameron. But it's like, really, his gravestone is going to say probably Alien and Blade Runner. And the reason for that is he literally created a world that we hadn't seen before. And he's a fantastic cinematographer anyway. He's a fantastic visualist. But I mean, and he's also done other things like in Legend. He literally built a forest which burnt down the 007 studio. But like with this, I mean, we just know we hadn't seen anything like this before. And not only that, but it spawned so many imitations and so many copies, and almost like his own genre,
Absolutely. And that was the thing that these younger people were missing, was this didn't exist at one point. Like you're seeing ground zero for like the cyberpunk look, and and looking at buildings that existed in the past that have been retrofitted into the future, that they're not going to tear everything down and build brutalist buildings or big glass spires or whatever. They're depending on the economy, and they do it, especially in second and third world countries and developing nations, where you just build on top of the thing you've got. And you got to kind of see what would it look like in the US when this was occurring. Because they used all of these backlot sets. They only filmed in a few actual locations. And so, they're like taking the New York City street sets that they've used for 1,000 movies and putting all this piping all over them and hanging all this neon all over them. And then shooting, at night, making everything wet. And then filling the whole place with smoke. And so you got this completely different atmosphere that really was just different from anything other than kind of how cities started to evolve in the 90s, especially over in Asia.
Well, for years, the thing you'd say about Blade Runner was it's a film that's like getting newer. or becoming. It's actually becoming, because it's like kind of like it's not getting dated. It's actually that's what Tokyo or whatever is becoming. And I think I mean, I totally agree with that. I mean, I think even now, we're kind of almost there. I mean, this is a film that makes flying cars kind of look realistic, which, for years we've been saying you've got to have flying cars in your sci-fi films. And, Back to the Future aside, they haven't really pulled that off. But in this, you're kind of like, I can actually see that happening. That kind of looks functional.
Yeah. And, they also were kind of smart about it. You can't have everybody in flying cars. It's just the cops and a few other people, probably rich people who have the flying cars.
Very rich people.
Yeah. And so it's like, of course it makes sense for, police and law enforcement to have something that can get in and out and, of crowds and all of that. But for Joe on the street, you don't really want them in something that can careen around and fly into the side of a skyscraper. Right. So it's, a lot of the design and I think a lot of people know kind of the background of the film, and I'm not sure how much to talk about it, like Sid Mead being brought in. He'd been a designer at a couple car companies and had become kind of this futurist that people used for industrial design and industrial art, and had kind of been finding his way into film really since like the late 70s. He'd worked on Star Trek: The Motion Picture and some other things. And he was just allowed to go hog wild on this. And I mentioned to Simon before we started recording, I watched the 3.5 hour Dangerous Days, the documentary that's about the making of Blade Runner before we got to this, because I've had the Blu-ray for probably 10 or 15 years. I never watched it. I honestly forgot I owned it. And yeah, I mean, it's interesting to hear the like art director and the
set designers.
The production designers kind of saying, like, well, they're grateful. They're glad to have been a part of it, but they're like, it was really Ridley Scott and Sid Mead. Like it was, we had jobs, we had things we were responsible for, but Ridley Scott knew what he wanted from looking at like old Metal Hurlant comics and heavy metal and things like that.
Yeah, same as did with Alien, kind of. Yeah.
Right.
Little Mobius again.
Right. I mean, and you can see it like in people's like hats and stuff that they're wearing. It's like no one ever drew a hat like that but Mobius.
I love Sebastian's hat that looks like a dustbin lid. I think it is a dustbin lid, actually, like a plastic dustbin lid.
Yeah. And one of the cool things about it is they did end up using, of course, practical things they found around when they were building a lot of these things. But they ended up making them so you didn't necessarily recognize them. Anything from how they built the buildings for their models for the flyovers of the city, to like dustbins on someone's head, right? So
there's a lot of Metropolis in this as well. That was a big, I think, kind of influence. But it's really cool how this they kind of merge almost like 1950s, 1940s film noir with basically sci-fi. So you have this weird kind of genre mix. So, it's like, and I think the first choice was Robert Mitchum for this, who, would have been way too old at this point. But you can totally see that. You can totally see they wanted to put Robert Mitchum wandering through the middle of this.
100%. Yeah. I part of why I wanted to include this as part of my canon is I think it laid the grounds for my interest in noir without me realizing it. Because I didn't think of it as being noir until really that book came out, that Paul Salmon book. Yeah. And then I was like, future noir, huh? And then, you sit there and think about it for 5 minutes and you're like, oh, all right. Because, there was definitely stuff out there about Blade Runner online, but you're talking about online of like 1998.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And so I read that book and it honestly kept me from enjoying the movie for a while after I read it, because then you can see every cut. You can see you're looking at things and going, oh, he talked about that cup he's holding and he, they bought that at Spencer Gifts or whatever.
Yeah.
And you're like, I don't want to know that while I'm watching the movie. And I've gone through similar stuff when I was in film school of, there was a period where I was learning how to edit film, and sitting and watching a movie, I'd be like, I can see every cut. This is a nightmare. Because you don't want to see every cut, right? You want to see the movie.
Yeah.
And so really after I read that book, I've taken years off in between. I only watch the movie now every and this was by far the freshest viewing I'd had of it really since I read the book 22 years ago.
I love that book, and I think I got it as a birthday present when I was at college. And I read it cover to cover really quickly in a couple of days. And I was probably the same as you. I don't think it put me off watching the film, but I think at that point I'd seen the film so much that I didn't need to watch it for a few more years.
Mm-hmm.
And now, of course, the book's faded away, and I just enjoy the film again. So yeah.
Yeah, I mostly remember hearing about, things that were behind the scenes, which you can't see, of course, on the film. The one thing I always look for is when the man stunt double comes in for Pris. Like, I can't not see that because it's so obviously not Daryl Hannah for that one shot. But
there's also the dodgy wigged stunt woman who's crashing through all the plates of glass for Zara.
Right. Yeah.
Deckard shoots her.
Which, I mean, I was glad to read that because as a kid, when I watched the movie the first time, I wasn't thinking stunt woman. I couldn't figure out why they did her hair wrong that day.
I had this weird theory that when a replicant got shot, they almost like tensed up or became more mannequin-like. And I was like, her hair's gone really tense.
It's a hell of a theory. I like it.
Weirdly, this is totally off topic, sorry, but there's a villainous character in Earthquake who's a would-be rapist who also watch Earthquake if you get a chance. He's either got a wig on or something weird's going on because he gets shot, I think, by George Kennedy, who rescues the girl he's got his sights on, and he suddenly has his hair suddenly goes permed after he's shot. And I'm like, that's very similar to Blade Runner. That reminds me of Blade Runner.
That is super weird. Yeah, I might watch the movie now just for that.
They just reshoots. They probably just brought him back months later.
Right. But yeah, I mean, and so you have all this like amazing design they have in the film. That all feels really practical. But when you bring in an industrial designer, they're thinking not just about like what would look cool, like let's have a futuristic parking meter. Like they're thinking through, well, what would you need to have a parking meter be like in a world where it's poorly policed and you're highly reactionary as cops. And it was really funny. I always noticed the parking meters had all these like police lights on them. And then they showed this old footage from when they were actually shooting Blade Runner with Sid Mead standing next to his parking meter. And he's like, yeah, because you don't know this, but if you attack the parking meter, it'll electrocute you.
It's like Robocop.
Right. And he's like, so, it protects itself so it can keep the money inside and no one can break into it. And I was just like, that's the kind of thought that went into like way more details in this movie than are ever going to really matter. But instead of just saying, make it look, shiny and that'll be the future, everything has a purpose. And so when you're watching it, you definitely get that, like, this is a natural evolution to everything that's occurring. I mean, I was 12, 13, and I understood, okay, there's been, Asian immigration into LA from, east to west. Of course, they would start in LA, the immigrants, and it's just kind of really infiltrated. And now you're advertising to, and I live in Texas. It's not like we don't have Spanish language advertising here. All of that totally made sense to me, watching the film, even as a kid. I was confused by what was going on with the animals in
it's
the movie.
Empathy, isn't it? It's like an empathy test. So I guess the replicants, you get a reaction out of them if they get twitchy about all these questions about torturing animals.
Well, so, I mean, there's a lot of different stuff there and, kind of thematically. I did end up reading the novel when I was about 14 or 15, and I've read it again twice since. In the novel, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep by Philip K. Dick, the animals are pretty much being wiped out by pollution across the planet. So having an artificial animal is the best people can do, and they miss having animals. So they're like, I'm going to have that. The reason the book is called Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep is in the book, Deckard's trying to buy an electric sheep to have, he keeps one on top of the roof of his building rather. And he's trying to get a bigger animal to impress his wife who's done with him in the book. And so
it'd be good that they got rid of that subplot.
Yeah, the book, I won't get too much into how different the book and the movie are, but that's kind of this like weird leftover vestigial part of the book. That's the whole reason there's this animal market. Those aren't real animals down in that market. When you see like the ostriches and all
they
of
do
that.
have that great line with Zara, don't they? Where he goes, "Is that real snake?" And she goes, "Would I be working here if it was a real snake?"
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, animals have become this whole like commodity and sign of wealth. But then of course Tyrell has his robot owl that's flying around his offices. So
yeah.
But yeah, so I mean, it's got a lot of that kind of stuff, and all starts working into kind of the themes of the thing. But anyway, I've been ranting for like 30 minutes, so
that's great. It's great. This is your movie, man. But it's like, no, I was just going to say it's interesting because like the questions they do with the test about the turtle on its back and stuff. I feel like the great thing about this film is it's very ambiguous, and I know some people, I'm not going to say modern audiences hate that more, but I think a certain amount of audiences always hated that. But the kind of films we like like The Thing or this, I think always end on an ambiguous note. But this is very ambiguous all the way through, just like the fact that the replicants seem to care about each other more than the humans do. Because, Rutger Hauer is genuinely moved when he's telling, Pris, there's only the two of us left now and stuff. And, whereas, Deckard's a bit of a cold fish, really, So all that stuff is great, really. Just the fact that this test triggers them.
Yeah.
And giving them memories just to make them more kind of like, I guess, like easy to control.
So yeah, I mean, the test is left over from the novel, I believe, but the basic idea of it is that for they're only supposed to live like 4 years or whatever, but the Nexus 6 anyway, because up until this point, the replicants, that's something they couldn't ever really replicate, was like a human reaction of like, how do you program empathy essentially? And so that was really what they're supposed to be testing. And the Nexus 6s are supposed to be so advanced, it takes a lot longer. What I got out of it when I was 13 was, I was like, okay, so the replicants don't know how to answer these questions. They have no context, was really how I was which is not wrong, but it's not the full answer, right? And then getting the whole, but then I got it when they were like, well, tell me about your mother, only the good things. And Leon's like, let me tell you about my mother. Boom. And that was when I was like, okay, I get it. I get where they're going with it. And I'm shocked to hear like other audiences are like, wait, what's going on? I'm like, you didn't get it from the gunshot when he asked about the mother?
But it's also, that's interesting because, of course, so the version I watched is my preferred version just because it's the one I'm used to and it's the one I watched hundreds of times, which is actually the one they went back. So they showed it at an advanced screening, didn't get a good audience response. So basically Warner Brothers said, we're going to put in a happy ending using old footage from The Shining. We're going to put in a Harrison Ford narration. And I believe the other thing was they cut out the Holden scene of him visiting Holden in the hospital, the first Blade Runner. And Harrison Ford went back under massive duress. He was already arguing with Ridley Scott because they really weren't getting on at all. I think probably because Ridley Scott's not that, or at least back then wasn't that good with actors. And Harrison Ford probably just didn't have any direction, and he wasn't very happy because he didn't really know what he was doing. But he went back and recorded that narration, which I think, it sounds kind of browbeaten and pissed off, and I think that's just Harrison Ford,
So they talked about that a lot during the documentary, and I mean, you're not wrong. You've guessed how it probably played out, except for the very last recording that they ended up using, because he tried to work with Ridley Scott, and they kept trying to write their own narration because they were told they had to do it after the test screenings had been so poor. And Ridley Scott basically ended up getting kind of fired off the film for like just that, like, we got to get the narration in. Like, they just kind of had it with him. So all Harrison Ford knew was he was showing up at the studio, and he walked into the sound booth and there's no one around, and he wandered down the hall, and he said there was this guy I'd never seen before pounding away at a typewriter, and he told me to go away. And he showed up 15 minutes later, and he said, at this point, I knew I had no contribution anymore to make to whatever the narration was going to be. I tried, I'd had my say.
Yeah.
He's like, I was under, contractual duress. I had to do this. And so I did the best I could, but I'd never seen it before. And so you get kind of what you get. And then he said it was pretty much fine for him, except for the very, very end, where he didn't like the fact they tacked on the happy ending, for sure. And he didn't,
which actually I always remember. Well, it's funny, I always remembered in my head him doing the voiceover and that being footage of the car driving around the hills from far away, from a helicopter shot. Mm-hmm. But actually watching it tonight, there's actually footage of him and Rachel in the car. So maybe I either block that out, but I do think I prefer this version in every sense, except I wish it finished at the apartment. So my preferred version of Blade Runner has still never been made. But then I also like, before I forget, I don't like Ridley Scott's cut that he went back and did. So basically, there was a theatrical international cut, which we both watched hundreds of times. And then they did a show reel. So they showed that around various places, kind of unofficially, as a director's cut. So I guess by 1992, Ridley Scott went, well, hang on, I've had enough of that. Here's my actual director's cut in 1992. So put in the unicorn sequence, which, can go either way. You could say either it shows humans dream the same as replicants, or you could say, haha, it proves that, which I'm sure I did in my paper, that Harrison Ford is a replicant. They cut out the voiceover, and they finished with the apartment, with them leaving the apartment. And then, of course, in 2007, he went back again, made a few tweaks for the final cut. But I actually still prefer the original. I mean, I don't like the Shining ending, but I was watching it tonight, and I was thinking, where Rutger Hauer kills Tyrell, he basically says, what do you want? And Rutger Hauer says, more life, fucker. And then, of course, afterwards, he kills him incredibly violently by pushing his thumbs into Tyrell's eyes and basically pulling its skull apart. And that is incredibly violent. And also the use of just saying fucker, that once, because I think that's one of the very few instances of swearing in the whole film. And compared to like With Now and I, previously a couple of weeks ago, it has a huge impact because you're not used to it. Well, Ridley Scott went back and changed that to I Want More Life, Father for his cut. And he also cut away, edited down the violence of Tyrell being killed. And I think it really cut the balls off it, to be honest. I much prefer this original version of that.
I mean, I am fine with all of the versions. Let me start there.
Star Wars.
Not okay with all the versions of Star Wars. Let's start there. But I think I find it fascinating. I mean, I remember hearing, oh, they're going to release this director's cut, in the early 90s, and watching it and going, okay, there's no voiceover, and oh, this ending's totally different. That was really my takeaway. And then I watched for this viewing the final cut. It was all, I only had time to watch one version if I was going to watch this freaking 4-hour documentary, apparently. But it also started this horrible trend of director's cuts that, it enabled Lucas to go back and retouch Star Wars. I think it gave him, permission to go do that. And tell directors, oh yeah, you guys, the movie's a living thing that you should keep messing with.
You keep messing,
yeah. And I think it's bad enough how much things get kind of retroactively changed in sequels, or they kind of, pave over things or change things. Really don't like messing with the film once it's been blocked and distributed.
I mean, the only difference is, I guess, Ridley Scott at least makes the original available.
Yeah.
Whereas Lucas, has erased all the original Star Wars. That's the big difference, I guess.
Yeah, and so as a fan of film, I find it more interesting to be able to have multiple versions to go, okay, I understand this is what the Warner Brothers wanted to put out there, and they felt they had to. This is if you didn't have as many notes from people who were sitting in a shopping mall somewhere in 1981 when they did the first screenings. This is what you would have gotten with the director's cut.
It's a bit like when Ridley Scott went back, I think, start of the 2000s with Alien. And I think he actually tightened up the end with Ripley trying to turn the self-destruct off, and he's stuck in the cocoon scene with Dallas, which hadn't been seen before. And it didn't really add or take away anything. It was just like, well, I could have done it this way. And it's like, yeah, you haven't spoiled it, but you haven't really added anything,
Yeah, I mean, I feel kind of the same way with the director's cut of Aliens. Like, you've added a couple minutes, but it's more stuff. So I won't argue with that, but it's and so it's interesting. But the removing the voiceover, I have no idea how I'd follow whether or not I would. I mean, I'd seen the movie 40 times by the time I saw it without a voiceover.
Yeah.
I'd read the novel. I mean, there wasn't, my hand was being well held. I don't know what it would be like to watch the movie without that. And in my head, there's still some things that I realize when I'm watching the movie. Well, I know that because in a theatrical cut, he says this, that, or the other.
Yeah.
How would I know, things about Gaff? How would I know things about Bryant?
Yeah.
But I think most of the stuff around when they're around the replicants, it's not like they're like cutting over to like Roy Batty's now got the mic and he's gonna, tell you what's going on with them. So the movie could carry itself just fine, in those sequences.
I have a feeling we would have been fine. I mean, I don't think it's any harder to understand than your average Stanley Kubrick film. I mean,
yeah,
stuff's happening. It's not like, oh my God, I'm having trouble falling. It's not like watching, Christopher Nolan or something lately. It's like basically, it's actually a pretty simple plot, let's be honest. And I think watching it tonight, I was like, Harrison Ford's not really doing much detecting. He's kind of finding stuff and then going to where it was sold and bumping into a replicant.
I mean, I don't disagree with that. I think it's interesting that, people talk about how much story is there to Blade Runner, because there's so much ambiance and all the other, there's a lot of ideas in Blade Runner, and the story kind of holds those ideas together. And he's never pitched as a detective. That's the thing, that even when Harrison Ford's complaining, I'm a detective who didn't do any detecting, I'm like, yeah, you were never supposed to be a detective. You're an assassin.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it's a noir thing, and so people immediately want to say detective, which is not, entirely wrong. But lots of noir actually does have voiceover. I'd say maybe like one in 4, if you watch one of a classic noir, has Double Indemnity has a voiceover. It's got, and they're all kind of done in this kind of And that's the thing is people like, oh, Harrison Ford sounds like he's not into it. I'm like, all of those. Go watch The Naked City. Go watch whatever. Everyone does this like real matter of fact, dry.
Yeah.
That's always at odds with what's going on the screen. That's kind of the genre.
That's why I think it works, actually. Yeah. Because I don't think I mean, you can go, oh, Harrison Ford sounds bored, but then you're like, well, he's kind of supposed to sound like that anyway.
Yeah.
You know, this guy's well weary. He doesn't want to be doing this, you know?
Right. Yeah, totally agree. But yeah, I mean, I agree that like as far as like him being a detective, that said, it's like it's not a Poirot movie. You know,
Yeah.
it's you know, this isn't Agatha Christie. And even if you go and read the original novel and kind of what the mystery he's supposed to be, it's more convoluted because he gets sexually involved with Rachel, who in the book, by the way, the androids are basically evil. I mean, they're definitely trying to live longer, but they're also like at the expense of everyone else in a way that here they're just trying to get by and the humans are in the way.
Yeah.
It's a little more malicious and a lot more manipulative in the original novel. Because Rachel's a bad guy sorry to spoil the book if you've never read it.
She's a femme fatale.
Yeah.
Because in this, she's more like, I wouldn't say a victim, but she's more just like a slight damsel in distress, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, as far as the noir bona fides, I mean, I would compare it a lot more to something like if you watch The Big Sleep, like, so if he is a detective, he goes to the old rich man's mansion. The old rich man's clearly like not well. He's kind of sickly, which is kind of a classic setup for all of these, you know, detective things. If you read any Chandler, and then there's the beautiful daughter.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean she's a femme fatale. I mean, that's
wayward daughter name.
Right. Yeah. And so, you know, you can compare it to Bacall in The Big Sleep and say, well, I mean, people will call her femme fatale just because she's a sexy woman in a noir movie, but she's not. That's not what she is in that movie. And so I compare Rachel a lot more to that, of like someone who's discovering something about herself because the detective has entered and disrupted the world through what he's bringing to her.
Yeah. And she's not even like kind of like particularly, like you say, malicious or crazy. Like I watched the Big Sleep version with Mitchum from the 70s, which we should do. We should do a double bill of those Mitchums from the 70s. Philip Marlowe.
Yes, absolutely.
But in that is Candy Clark, who's basically like, you know, the naughty young drug taking, take my clothes off all the time daughter who also could possibly kill somebody by accident. And I'm like, Rachel's not really like that. She's actually quite subdued, really. She's more like, you know, I just want to know what I am, really.
Well, right. And there's two, I don't want to get too much into The Big Sleep. There's two daughters in The Big Sleep. There's the responsible one, that's Bacall, and then there's the crazy.
Sarah Miles is the sensible one in the 70s one, I think.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, and you know, full disclosure, you know, I have no doubt that whatever fired in my brain when Sean Young showed up when I was 13, and you know, in Joan Crawford shoulder pads and hair roll, like just like lodged itself deep in my brain somewhere. I mean, it
looks fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, I
mean, actually, everybody looks fantastic in this. To be honest, it's like down to the bit players. It's like down to is it Chang who does the eyes, and they go into his freezer room.
Oh, James Hong.
Yeah. It's like everybody's great in this. Even like the guy in the bar, the sleazy guy Taffy. Hey, pal, have a drink in the house, pal. It's like just everybody's great.
But yeah, I mean, it does play to a lot of those sort of like, you know, there are things that it does that are very not noir. Of course, the sci-fi elements. There's no like, oh, well, we're actually going to find out all this stuff about the Tyrell Corporation, which if it were like a true detective noir story, that would definitely be part of it. You'd have a whole like further plot about how they were really screwing over all the, androids, and so that was actually what was going on or whatever. And this is really straightforward. This is, he's an assassin. He's got to go out and find these Nexus 6s, and take them out. And that's where it kind of, to me, falls off from, is it pure noir? Does it borrow a whole lot from it? Yeah.
So. There's also the whole ending, really, from I guess the confrontation with Daryl Hannah onwards is gets very I guess philosophical in the fact that it's a brilliant ending, and without jumping the gun.
Yeah, that's fine. People have all seen this movie.
Yeah, it's spoilers for 40 years now, 50 years. But it's it's just all the stuff with Batty kind of basically torturing him and chasing him around, and I just love all the lines. I mean, the script for this has loads of memorable lines, I thought you were a good man. Are you not a good man? And time to die and all this kind of stuff. Or when he smashes his head through the bathroom and he goes, "You got to get it up if you want to live," and all this kind of stuff. And he's just chasing Harrison Ford around, kind of playing with him, really, like a cat playing with a mouse. And I love him just catching him at the end and realizing that all life is kind of valuable. And his spiel, one of the greatest speeches in movie history, Tears in the Rain, up there with Quint's speech about the Indianapolis, I think. And really, watching it now as I get older, I'm also much more about that's like all of us. We all have these magical moments that we may not get to share with other people, or we may not have many people we can share those with, maybe a partner if we're lucky or whatever. But it's I've seen things you wouldn't believe, and they're all going to be lost with me when I go, it's great.
Yeah. And I think that's really this, it's what I love about science fiction is it takes things and kind of puts an analogy that's out of context from our current reality enough that it becomes universalized, right? And the themes of the movie and our relationship with our creator, whether we think of it as being our God or whether it being our parents, and this movie plays with both ideas, right? It's what is Tyrell? He's a capricious god sitting at the top of the pyramid, who's creating life. And he's treating it like product. He's like, I've got to build in planned obsolescence for my own things. So one, they don't become a human race. And there's definitely relation to biblical stories and other mythos there of you don't want the humans coming and thinking that they're as important as the gods. Right. And they've made sure to, keep the replicants even off planet. It's illegal for them to be on the source of their origin.
Well, it's really interesting you mention all that, because this is obviously something that, an itch that Ridley Scott just can't scratch, because much more than the alien, that's what he's kept going through Prometheus and even Alien Covenant. The fact that there's these replicants like David and those played by Michael Fassbender, who are kind of, superior to, the humans that created them. And, what happens when they evolve, really? Are they going to be are they going to go, well, I need to get rid of these humans, they're kind of annoying?
Yeah. There's perfectly good reasons. The movie posits it as, there are these villains, but there's no villains at all in Blade Runner. In that respect, if you watch it on a really base level, of course, there's these crazy robot people who are killing people, but they're like anybody. They want to understand where they came from, and they want to live as long as possible.
Which perspective as well, because from their point of view, like they say, do you feel like a big man? You just shot a woman in the back, an unarmed woman, It's Harrison Ford's character is not heroic,
Right. Yeah. And I think that's what he's, the point of Deckard is he's suffering through the my place in this universe is taking life. He starts off with the movie of gotten away from it, but it's almost like it's his destiny. Like he can't get away from what this thing is until he's roped in with Rachel, who he's supposed to have killed, and in kind of liberating her, liberates himself, right?
Yeah.
And as a kid, I was watching this stuff, and on some level, I got all of that. Like I got that, of course these robots want to live longer, that these, replicants, and of course, this creepy dude living at the top of the tower is not going to play ball. And I thought of it more of a father figure than as, kind of a more cosmic level, analogy. But
he's Frankenstein. It's Frankenstein as well, isn't it? It's like I created you and then stopped giving a shit. And it's like, and now you're coming back to kind of haunt me, Right.
Yeah, absolutely. I did write down at the top of my notes, this is the Frankenstein story. For exactly that reason. It's the creator not caring enough about their creations.
Well, I love when, Rutger Hauer does go and confronts him, in the penthouse. How, he's kind of like, first of all, he's going through all the ways that they can't change the built-in, death date. But then, he's like, but you did, the flame that, burns twice as brightly lasts half as long. And, you've been great. And then, of course, he kind of seals his own fire by going, really shit, do what you want. It's like, of course, and he kills him. So it's like, you create your own demons, literally,
Yeah. Yeah. And the part that both James Hong's character and then J.F. Sebastian play, where they're terrified, both of them, but they also both are looking in wonder at these, because they know what these things are that they've made. And it's a little bit like being really impressed with this, suitcase bomb you made.
Yeah.
As you're going, man, this thing really worked just as it's exploding in your face.
Deadly virus, we could say these days.
Yeah.
I mean, it's also, there's a lot of religious imagery in there because, I think Rutger Hauer describes them himself as angels, fallen angels, whatever. And then later on, I was thinking tonight, I'm sure I thought it before years ago, but, when he's trying to keep his hand going because he's starting to close down, he puts a nail through his hand. I'm like, well, that's obviously kind of crucifixion here, isn't it? It's like,
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah, I mean, there's even a shot of him standing on top of the roof, and they do this low angle at him, and he's lit from behind, and there's these fan blades spinning on either side of him like giant wings.
Yeah,
I mean, they're trying. There's definitely a lot of kind of imagery there of, and even him with that hand that has the nail through it, lifting up, Deckard. I mean, that's not lightweight, religious imagery that they're throwing at you there.
I've got to tell a quick story which always made me laugh. I think it's in the Future Noir book, but so Ridley Scott hired Rutger Hauer on the strength of all the stuff he'd done with Verhoeven in the Netherlands, like Soldier of Orange and Turkish Delight and Katie Temple and stuff. And I think Rutger Hauer had been in maybe that Stallone movie, is it Nighthawks, where he plays the villain, the terrorist. That's pretty good. But so apparently he turned up to Ridley Scott's office wearing a pink skin-tight leather suit and exceptionally women's sunglasses, a massive pair of women's sunglasses and cowboy boots. And Ridley Scott was like, I think Rutger Hauer actually said years later, he said, Ridley Scott looked very, very uneasy. Look, if I made the right decision here.
But that's the guy who's going to bring you Roy Batty, right? I mean, there's a lot of different ways to have done Roy Batty, and it's so singular. And that's kind of the great thing about all of the replicants is Daryl Hannah's 19 in this movie, and she kills it.
Yeah,
it may be her best role. Yeah.
She's brilliant. And you've got like Brian James as Leon, like the kind of heavy sidekick. And he's great. You know, I've seen him in other stuff, but he's great in this as well. Where he's like, you know, it's a terrible thing to live in fear, and he's throwing Harrison Ford around and stuff. And it's like where Rutger Hauer's kind of almost teasing him, being a bit cruel to him. He's like, "Did you go and get your precious pictures back?" He goes, "No, there were men there." He goes, "Policemen." It's all great. It's so good. You know, they're also distinctive, and you kind of feel when they get killed. You know, I think that's important.
Yeah, I mean, certainly when Zora he has to kill Zora, and just even how they handle that of this isn't a moment of triumph in any way, shape, or form. It's an utter tragedy what's happening. He just shot a woman in the back. That's what you just watched your hero doing for the past 2 minutes. And
he's kind of disgusted with himself. You know, his first instinct is to get drunk, I think.
Oh yeah, I mean, in this cut that I watched, and I don't remember if it's in the original cut, he immediately walks across the street and buys a literal like fifth of booze and just starts drinking from the bottle in that moment. That's what he's doing when Leon gets his hands on it.
Yeah, and
he still has the bottle in his hand when he returns to his apartment with Rachel after she's taking care of Leon.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just like watching it today, and I think you need that power of performance because, like we said, it is quite slow. So it's all little looks and gestures. I mean, there's a great, Rutger Hauer again. You know, the little smirk he does when Brian James is putting the eyes on the shoulders when they're kind of interrogating him. And also, like when he finds Chris's body and he kisses her and her tongue's sticking out, and when he pulls back, the tongue's gone. So he just pushed the tongue in. It's just like little things, very small things, but they all add up,
Yeah, and there's still kind of this weird inhumanness to them of like, as he's kind of saying, he's mourning Chris, by far the most of any of them for obvious reasons. But, he reaches into her and it's her life, right? It's her blood. And he's got it on his hands and on his face, through the whole end of the movie.
Starts howling.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, he's at a very base visceral level at that point.
She shouldn't have done gymnastics. She should have just killed Harrison Ford. You're going, look at my gymnastics. Get a chance to get it done. But it's no, I mean, it's great. It's so good. It's just so good. I don't really have anything. I mean, it's weird thinking back to when this was out, because I remember even when I went to college at the start of the 90s, a big deal was the soundtrack finally came out 10 years after the film.
Mm-hmm. And
it was like, so I remember when I first went to college, just listening to the soundtrack over and over, because I hadn't really heard that outside of the film. And again, it's a mixture of kind of like, 1930s, almost like jazz ditties. And of course, Vangelis doing his crazy electronic synth scores.
I think the sound in the movie, it's interesting because the music is almost treated like a sound layer in a way I can't really point to too many other movies doing. I can point to the music almost driving a movie, and I'd point it, and I'm going to get a little obscure here, but Tangerine Dream's score to The Keep.
Yeah.
I think really does a lot to kind of.
That's a very good choice, man. Or Sorcerer, actually.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. But here there's the sound design on this to me is as good as Star Wars. I think Star Wars is the top of the heap as far as sound design goes. But the sounds that occur within Blade Runner are as singular and as recognizable and as understandable as the sounds in Star Wars that just make sense. And I looked and I was like, did Ben Burtt work on this? Like, who was working on this? And I actually had a really hard time figuring it out because there's all these credits in IMDb of like, oh, this is the person who did this in 2007. And I was like, yeah, but who did it in 1982? And Vangelis's score is both, you mentioned the jazz songs, is I always forget the word, what is it? I can't remember. Everyone's going to be yelling the word while they're listening to the podcast. Diegetic, non-diegetic. It's like, that song is actually playing in the, the bar they're in, versus, what is the sound that's happening as far as, their world around them. And just kind of because there's just tones a lot of the time. But I also, the sound of even the crosswalk signs, like please walk, please, like I know in my head exactly what those things sound like to this day.
Well, it's a lot of overlapping, isn't it? It's like a cacophony. So there's always, it's overcrowded, same as the actual film. It's like, you've got loads of stuff going on.
Yeah. And talking about overcrowded, even the street scenes, and overlapping, you're seeing people walk by in what looks like, 1980 punk outfits next to somebody who's in a full geisha suit, who's next to somebody in a gas mask for some reason. And then you have Rachel walking by in a full fur with her hair done in like victory curls. And all of that can coexist, and you buy it. You're like, this is what this world looks like that has too many people in it and everyone's doing their own thing and just trying to scrape by. I should
talk about the mistakes as well, because what I always liked about this was, Ridley Scott didn't go back and fix a couple of things. So, I think like Harrison Ford's told that the 6 escaped, but of course we only ever see, I think it's 5. Because one supposedly died, got fried running through some security thing. So there's 4 left, but there's like little mistakes. So it's like, so you're always like, well, who's the 6th? Is that supposed to be Harrison Ford, or is that just like, it is just a mistake, but it's, I kind of like films that kind of make little mistakes like that and don't get fixed as well. I think he might have actually fixed that for his director's cut.
So he might have. I know that in the original book or the original screenplay, there was another replicant who was like more of a homebody sort of person who they executed. I know they were talked in the documentary about the scenes that they were going to do with that character, and like, we're out of time. We're not going to do that. Yeah.
Well, this also had a weird sequel, way before the actual sequel. Blade Runner 2049? Actually, Soldier, my guilty pleasure, Soldier with Kurt Russell killing everybody. Apparently, David Peoples wrote that as well, and it's kind of like he calls it a sidequel because it takes place in the same universe. And I think there's one shot on the trash planet that Kurt Russell gets dumped on when he's deemed too old and knackered to be a soldier anymore, where you see the remains of a spinner in one of the junk piles.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah, but then of course we finally did get a sequel about 3 years ago, which I liked. I think, you can definitely tell it's taken off a few of the rough edges of the original, but I actually thought it was a very decent sequel.
I liked it too. I liked it quite a bit. It felt very much a piece of the original. I think maybe too much in some ways. Yeah. I would have been totally happy if they didn't feel like they needed to tie it so close to the events of this movie. But in doing so, I was like, okay, if you're gonna do this, and I had a total gut reaction when they brought Rachel out. In the sequel. It just like I can't believe this. I know it's just a character Sean Young played when she was like 19. Why is this impacting me watching this? But it was
great how they tortured Deckard with that, because it's kind of like, it's like somebody producing a girlfriend you had when you were 19 and going, you could be happy with her, for the rest of your life. It works. It works very well. Although I will say, like you said earlier, I feel like they pushed the evil corporation thing a bit too hard in the sequel, which seemed a bit more obvious than this. It seemed less artistic, if that makes sense. and more blockbuster.
Yeah, I mean, and I can't say I love the casting of Jared Leto as the guy. It's hard
Yeah,
when an actor's mere existence in a role kind of is distracting, but
yeah,
the design on it, and it was absolutely gorgeous as well. It lived up to that. It was interesting to see, okay, here's the jump 30 years on. Here's, a lot of the same ideas of, like, instead of the giant tower ads of, a geisha selling you cigarettes, or, Coca-Cola at 40 stories, all of which, by the way, if you go to Vegas, you're like, yep, all of that became real.
yeah,
It's the 3D holograms of,
yeah.
I don't want to get into right. And I mean, it's a remarkable movie. And when they were making it, I was like, man, this is quite the studio doesn't realize this isn't going to do well. Like, they've forgotten the original is a cult movie that's done very well, because I've bought 6 copies of it over the years.
It's a bit like Tron Legacy, where it's like, somebody's going to get sacked over that, but I'm glad they made it.
Yeah, absolutely. When we went to go see it, I want to say opening weekend, there was hardly anybody there. Like, it was, I was like, oof, like, because I think a lot of people who are the young movie going audience still haven't really clicked to what the deal is with Blade Runner. And
also, I don't want to say it made you think, but it was kind of slow again, and it had a lot of big ideas. And I don't want to sound like an old fart. I'm very patronizing, but I'm not sure if a lot of 20-year-olds can kind of handle that. In this kind of, like, this social media, boom, 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 boom time. I don't know if they really have the patience to sit through 3 hours of, not much happening, except, atmosphere.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't necessarily spoon feed you everything, and that can be hard for people that often will surprise you when you talk to them about a movie.
Yeah.
When other people, that's one of the things that I think is hilarious about going to see a movie with Jamie is I'll be like, oh, did you get where, this or that happened? That was a little subtle. And she just looks at me like I'm an idiot. She's like, yes, I got that. What is the matter with you? Like, oh, sorry. I was just impressed with, like, how subtle that was. You thought that was subtle? I was like, oh, just never mind. She's very good at watching movies. But yeah, I mean, I don't want to dog too much on the kids.
No.
I understand they watch movies somewhat differently and maybe for different reasons, but as far as, like, having it's remarkable that there's this this perfect piece of pop art that they made with Blade Runner, to me, that has all these pieces of everything from, like you mentioned, Metropolis right out of the gate when we got going.
Yeah.
That kind of over and over just kind of, comes up. I mean, they've been ripping off Blade Runner now. That movie's 40 years old. So that means it was released in 82. That'd be the comparison to right now. Like, if it was 1982, you'd be talking about, like, a movie that came out in 42 or 43. And we have not drastically improved movie making technique in that 40 years. Like, it's hard to point to something, and I can do this too with movies from the 60s, but like, I don't think anything's better than Lawrence of Arabia, full stop. Like, that's a great movie. I haven't seen anything like it that's topped it. And I think that it has rich thematic things to discuss about kind of the nature of our relationship with our own lives and the choices we make, right up to and including the Gaff's line of, or rather his line, I guess it's his line about
nobody lives forever.
Nobody lives forever. And then, and that's what I was talking about, like, the things that you think about of, well, I don't know how long she has. Well, who does know how long you have?
Yeah.
So,
I mean, in a way, I guess the point is, it doesn't matter if you're a replicant or a human, it's how you act.
Right.
Yeah.
And how we are with our responsibility to other people. And this is a world that's just absolutely absolved itself of responsibility for anybody. Particularly, their most marvelous creation that they treat like a 1970 or 1992 Kia or something.
So this came out the same summer as E.T. and Wrath of Khan and The Thing, and it kind of got lost in the shuffle a bit. I mean, it definitely found its audience on rental video, and and I think it's just grown, in power ever since. Really, I mean, it's one of those. It's kind of like John Carpenter's The Thing. It's one of those films that kind of was resurrected slowly through being first hired and then bought on video and then DVD. Funnily enough, same with The Thing. Got a sequel 30 years later. I mean, it's kind of funny that happens with those kind of cult films. Somebody goes, "Hang on, lots of people actually like this. Let's make another one. Let's try and make another one." But yeah, I mean, I love this film, and I thoroughly enjoyed watching it again. I realized that actually, even at work last week, I said to somebody, "You've done a man's job, sir." And I was like, "Oh my God, I got that from Blade Runner." So yeah, it's definitely deeply ingrained. I've got a couple of small bits of trivia for you, though, if you fancy it.
Please.
Well, the first one was, so Ridley Scott had a very contentious relationship with his crew on this one. So originally, of course, Ridley Scott had a great time making Alien. Had his, cool blimey governor, is it tea break time? With Alien a few years later, working in England. I think Ridley Scott had the flip version of that, which was he was working with an American crew, and they made up T-shirts. It got so bad that they made up T-shirts and wore them saying, "Yes, Governor, my ass," on. And Ridley Scott made his own T-shirts and started wearing those back, which said "Xenophobia sucks." So not a happy working environment for the film. And the other thing I found out today, just reading around, so Eldon Tyrell is supposed to actually be the mentor for Peter Weyland from the Alien movies, played by Guy Pearce, I think, in Prometheus. So basically, they exist in the same universe, which I guess is where David comes from. So
yeah, there's. I didn't want to track it too much because there's Ridley Scott has kind of insisted that the Alien and the Blade Runner universe is the same one. I don't have a problem with it, other than like he's co-opting both Dan O'Banion's script and Philip K. Dick's novel in doing so, which always just feels a little weird to me. But I think that it makes total and obvious sense that given what happens in Alien and, kind of the nature of how we understand artificial life in Blade Runner, I can see how as a director, he just spent all this time making Alien, goes on to Blade Runner and is like, well, I guess artificial people are my thing. As well as, getting out into the colonies, which was a part of what was going on in Alien. So I haven't seen
which is a link to.
What's that?
I was just going to say, and is a link to, and I was just going to say, and is a link to Total Recall as well. Going off world. Yeah, well, that's more taking a holiday, I guess. Yeah.
Well, I mean, there is a whole colony on Mars. I mean, you could definitely say that, and Philip K. Dick, as a writer, if you've not had a chance to read his novels, they're short and harrowing. I don't know how else to put it. Like they're exhausting by the time you finish them. Really heady emotional stuff, in big picture things. But yeah, the only trivia that I really wanted to play with was, the Bradbury building is so famous from this. But it's one of those things, you start watching older movies and it starts popping up. It's in The Unfaithful in 1947, the Jury, DOA. It's in Marlowe, starring James Garner and a very young Bruce Lee. And my favorite is that it is in Janet Jackson's Rhythm Nation video. And then he also uses the Ennis house, at least the design from the Ennis house, which people will recognize if they've ever seen House on Haunted Hill with Vincent Price. It's the kind of weird Aztec-y cube farm sort of look to everything. So anyway, I just like the fact that, they use these buildings that we kind of associate with Blade Runner, but it's like realistically, they reuse a lot of locations, including, they use the Union, whatever, the train station in Blade Runner is the police station. And you'll see that in a million movies as well. But apparently they kept that police office where Bryant is sitting, and they just use it now as an office. Or at least they were in 2005 still. I don't know if it's still there. And I've never been to that train station. But I think that train station's in The Escape and a few other things as well.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
But yeah, everything in Hollywood gets used again, man.
Yeah. It's like the town square in Back to the Future?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I personally can't think of anything else to say.
I could probably go on for another 2 hours, and I probably shouldn't. So
you've seen the documentary, though. I haven't.
Yeah.
The T-boy.
Yeah, I mean, if it's been a while since you've seen Blade Runner, I think it's one of those ones that, for me, it had been probably 5 or 6 years since I'd watched the movie, maybe longer. And I just really, really enjoyed watching it again. I'd actually said to Jamie before we started, let's watch an hour of it tonight and an hour of it tomorrow night. And we ended up just, it's not a short movie. No. We made it through, I think, pausing once to put dishes away or something. But we just really enjoyed rewatching it again. So, and it honestly, I have this set that has the US cut, the final cut that I watched, has the documentary, a bunch of bonus stuff. But then I also noticed it has the work print in there. So, which I've never watched. I didn't even notice that disc was in there. So I'm going to go back and watch the work print in the next few weeks to see what the heck that's all about.
So how many discs is your version?
A lot. I don't know. It's
probably I've got 4. Okay. Oh yeah. So you might have the biggest one, because I remember when this came out, you could get a 2, a 4, or maybe a 6, and I've got the 4. So
I may have the 6 then, because there's a whole bunch of discs in there.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like I say, definitely, if you haven't seen Blade Runner, oh my God, go and watch it immediately. But I'm sure most of the people who listen to this have obviously watched it. Mm-hmm. I think, again, like I said right at the start, just a defining film for our generation. I mean, it's not like Star Wars where, everybody saw it and they were blown away by it. And, it was like it was more like a kind of secret society thing where, I guess if you were like a bit of a film buff, it was like, hey, you gotta watch Blade Runner. It's like kind of, I mean, I remember getting annoyed because like a girl at high school borrowed my video, and then the girls borrow your video at high school because they treat them as presents, and you have to go around their house to get it back 4 years later. But yeah, she kept it for ages. I remember like saying, I'm detoxing. I need to watch some Blade Runner. I haven't seen it for like a year now. And I'm not like that anymore, but no, I mean, tonight, like I say, watching it tonight, last night, it really hasn't dated that much, apart from the odd moment. I think apart from the kissing with Rachel, and maybe apart from early on, the captain using the M word, saying he says skin jobs are like, calling a black person.
Yeah.
I think, you probably wouldn't have that in it now. But
I think that was an interesting bit in the movie, and I don't. because they are contextualizing, like, we're past that now, but
That's true.
yeah.
That's true.
And so, I mean,
you probably still wouldn't say it though, would you?
Right. Yeah. I mean, you'd find a more subtle way to do it, but I thought it was an interesting bit of communicating to the audience, that there's this basic racism, or, how people thought of replicants. On the
just his character, because he was like, if you're not with us, you're little people. Mm-hmm. And basically we're going to push you around.
Yeah. And not a terribly, it was an interesting way to think about cops, and maybe prescient for 2019 to 2021, but
very sadly true.
Yeah. So one of the things they do talk about in the doc, about the kiss, and I want to talk about it because I got a lot of social media play about 3 years ago where people, the kids found Blade Runner and were like, oh my God, he's violently attacking Rachel. That was part of a much longer sequence that the studio cut down to being that short. And it was one of several takes. They were just having a really hard time getting. Sean Young was like 19 when she was doing this. And it was a choice they made with her on the set that day to try that, because other things, I guess, weren't working particularly well. Well, she ended up in tears crying after that. And Harrison Ford realized, like, this didn't work at all. And he went, like, where no one could see him but her. And he dropped trow and showed her his butt to moon her, which was a big thing, a big comedy thing. So if you're offended by that, I'm sorry, but mooning used to be a big comedy thing in the 80s.
Can't do that either.
Yeah.
Sexual harassment.
Right. But so Sean Young was talking about just laughing in the documentary. But admitting, like, she was so green, it was a little hard for her to get through that sequence. And they tried they had some ideas for how that sequence was supposed to go, and they just went wrong at the beginning.
Well, it's part of history as well, because I'm thinking, even in one of the Indiana Jones movies, I think it's Last Crusade, he kind of grabs a girl and kisses her, and she goes, you need to, like, stop before you need to be asked before you do that. And then she grabs him back, and it's like, it's funny, but it's like, you just don't do that anymore, right?
Right. Yeah. It's absolutely, there was a reason they did it. It wasn't like they were doing something that was groundbreaking with that at the time. And it hasn't aged particularly well. It was just interesting to hear, to me, kind of what the context was of how that scene even happened. It felt less jarring to me knowing it was coming this time, and kind of knowing people had been talking about it, but I'll never watch the movie again without thinking about it.
Well, I think also you and I are of the generation that are probably a bit more lenient, because we're like, oh yeah, they used to do that.
Yeah.
Whereas, if you showed it to somebody younger, they might be like, we've never done that. So it's like, what the hell's going on? I think that's a slight difference.
Yeah. I mean, we
same as, every 80s film.
Right. You win a girl by relentlessly haranguing her. That's what we learned from 80s films.
Yeah, kiss her hard enough, she'll like it.
You'd mentioned Metropolis kind of at the beginning.
Yeah.
And I think that maybe one of the most, and I thought about that. I wrote down, well, how is this different? Because it's, there's a woman who's a robot, the whole 9 yards. And kind of this future landscape and all of that. And I think maybe the big difference is that the world, and it's not that different, right? The world of the workers and kind of the common man is literally subterranean in Metropolis. And everything above that is where the people who are running the show get to enjoy this utopia on the top. And the only person we see in Blade Runner doing that is Tyrell.
That's true.
Even his own employees are on the street level. And there's no Garden of Delights or any of that. And there's certainly, this isn't about the rights of the worker, but it is interesting that flash forward 60 years from Metropolis, you got something that you got this other visual masterpiece that had a lot in common. And I don't know if we're going to another 20 years get something that's going to blow our minds all over again. But that's that's kind of even if you've never seen Metropolis, go find the Giorgio Moroder version or whatever and watch it. But I appreciate that you brought that up.
Yeah, I mean, like I say, it's hard to think we can evolve anywhere else from this because, of course, James Cameron's like, I'm going to do it in 3D with Avatar. And it's like, yeah, it's cool, but it's not. It's tiny. It's a tiny kind of like, tiptoe forward compared to like the huge leap I feel like Blade Runner was. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure if we're capable of leaps like that anymore, really. I mean, unless you literally end up in the film, maybe it's like,
Yeah, and it's funny you should say that because I did definitely have the thought of, when I watch an Avengers movie, I don't want to necessarily be in the middle of like the end of Endgame, but I wouldn't mind having shawarma with the Avengers. Like that'd be a good time, right? I'd like to know Tony Stark. And in this movie, it's like I enjoy being in the movie, but through the pinhole of the movie. I don't want to live in that world, even though I kind of am getting closer and closer to living in that world. I enjoy seeing these characters, and maybe that's why the sequel hit me weird is I didn't feel like I needed to see more of these characters at the end of the movie. It was almost like this little snow globe of a world, and it was perfect. And it didn't need, embellishment or anything else.
And that's that's the best sign-off compliment you could probably say, actually, I think.
All right. Well, we'll wrap it up from here. And thanks again. And we will be back soon.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.
I've seen things you people wouldn't believe. Attack ships on fire off the shore of Orion. I watched C-beams glitter in the dark near the 10-house gate. All those moments will be lost in time, like tears.
That about wraps it up for this edition of The Signal Watch, a production of the League of Melbotus. Thanks for sticking with us. If you enjoyed the podcast, we invite you to drop on by the Signal Watch blog, where you'll find write-ups of a wide variety of movies and more. We'd love to hear from you, so find us online and let us know what you think. Whether you prefer email, blog comments, or social media, we'll be happy to hear from you. We'll be back soon with more exceedingly high-quality content. So, until next time, God damn it, babies, you've got to be kind.